He said it the way someone reads out a grocery list. No raised voice, no trembling hands. Just words, laid flat on the kitchen table between us like they were nothing. Mom, we need you to add Derek's name to the title. It makes sense. You're not getting younger, and it'll be easier for everyone when the time comes. I remember looking at my son, my Daniel, and thinking, who taught you to talk like this? Because it wasn't me. I didn't answer right away. I never do. That's something people have never understood about me. My silence isn't confusion. It never has been. I was 63 years old, a retired occupational therapist who had spent 31 years helping people rebuild their lives after strokes, accidents, surgeries. I knew exactly what was happening in that kitchen. I just needed a moment to decide how much of it I was going to show. I picked up my tea, I took a sip, and I said, "Let me think about it. My name is Margaret. I have lived in the same house in Oakville, Ontario for 27 years. A gray and white two-story on a quiet street near the lake, with a garden I planted myself and a porch where I used to drink coffee with my husband Roy every single morning until the February he didn't wake up. That was 4 years ago. Cardiac arrest, the doctor said. Fast, they told me, as if that was supposed to help. Roy was 61. We had plans. After he passed, Daniel came back. He had been living in Calgary with his wife Renee for 6 years. I had always been polite to Renee. She was efficient, that's the word I would use. She organized things, managed things, decided things. She had a way of entering a room and immediately rearranging it in her mind. I could see it in her eyes, that quiet inventory she was always taking. When Daniel suggested they move in to help me out, I said yes. I want to be honest about that. I said yes because I was grieving, and the house felt enormous, and I missed the sound of someone else moving around in the morning. That was my mistake, and I own it completely. They moved in during April. By July, Renee had reorganized my kitchen. She didn't ask. I came downstairs one morning, and my cast-iron pan, the one Roy bought at a market in Port Hope on our anniversary, was gone from its hook. Everything had been moved. The mugs I used every day were on the highest shelf. The things I never touched were right at eye level. I asked her about it. She smiled and said, "I just thought it made more sense flow-wise." I put my mugs back where they belonged. She moved them again 2 days later. That was when I understood that this was not going to be about flow. Daniel had always been a gentle boy. That's what made it so disorienting to watch what happened to him over those months. He started finishing Renee's sentences. He started sighing when I spoke. There was a particular look he developed, not unkind exactly, but distant, like he was watching me from the other side of thick glass and had decided not to tap on it. I want to be fair. I don't think my son is a bad person. I think he is a man who loves his wife more than he is willing to examine what that love is costing him. I have seen it before, in other families. It is not unusual. That doesn't make it hurt less. The request about the title came 8 months after they moved in. I had known something was coming. Renee had been asking questions, casual ones, the kind you're not supposed to notice. How does the will work? Is the house in a trust? What did Roy's pension look like? I answered vaguely. I smiled. I kept my cards very close. What they didn't know, what I had never told Daniel, because it had never been his business, was that 6 weeks after Roy died, I had met with a lawyer. Roy had always been careful about these things. He had a saying, "Hope for the best, plan for everything else." I had followed his advice. The house was already held in a family trust I controlled entirely. Any changes to the title required my sole written consent, witnessed and notarized. There was nothing Daniel or Renee could do to that house without me, but they didn't know that. And I decided, standing in my kitchen holding my tea that evening, that I was not going to tell them yet. After Daniel made the request, I went upstairs and I called my oldest friend, Patricia. We have known each other since teachers' college in the late 80s, though I went into healthcare instead. Patricia is the kind of woman who says exactly what she thinks and has never once apologized for it. I told her what Daniel had said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maggie, that's not a request. That's the beginning of something." I knew she was right. I also called my lawyer the next morning. His name is Gerald, and he has an office on Lakeshore. Roy trusted him completely, which means I trust him completely. I explained the situation. He confirmed what I already knew: the trust was solid, the house was protected, and then he said something I wrote down on a notepad and kept on my nightstand for weeks afterward. "The question isn't whether they can take the house, Margaret. They can't. The question is whether you want to keep living like this." I thought about that for a long time. Things got worse before I made my decision. A week after Daniel's request, I came downstairs to find Renee sitting at the dining room table with a folder of papers. She looked up when she heard me and didn't close the folder right away. I saw my name on one of the pages. I saw the words, "property transfer." I kept my face completely still. "Morning," I said. "Morning," she said, and closed the folder. At dinner that night, Daniel brought it up again. They were both at the table. Renee had made pasta, which she was very proud of, though she had not asked whether I wanted pasta. "Mom, we've been thinking more about the title, about what we discussed." "Have you?" I said. "It just makes financial sense." Derek, he meant himself, Daniel Derek. He sometimes went by his middle name with Renee, which had always struck me as odd. It would make things cleaner legally, if anything happened to you. I looked at him for a moment. "Nothing has happened to me," I said. "Right, but I'm 63, Daniel. I work out 3 times a week. I had a full panel done in March. My doctor says I'm in excellent shape." Renee set down her fork. "It's not about health, Margaret. It's about being practical." I noticed she had called me Margaret. She had never called me that before. It had always been Mom, or, in the early years, Mrs. Holloway. Margaret was a new register entirely. "I understand," I said. "I'll speak to Gerald." "Who's Gerald?" Renee asked. "My lawyer," I said. Something shifted in her expression. Just slightly. A tightening around the eyes. "You have a lawyer?" Daniel asked. "Roy and I set everything up years ago," I said pleasantly. "It's all very organized. Don't worry." I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Calm. Not because I had a plan yet, but because I had seen the board clearly for the first time. And I knew that whatever they thought was happening, they were working from the wrong information. What followed was about 6 weeks that I will not pretend were easy. Renee began making comments about the house that were clearly designed to make me feel like a guest in it. She mentioned, more than once, that the layout didn't work for 3 adults. She told Daniel loudly enough for me to hear from the hallway that my presence made it hard to relax. She began locking the door to the main bathroom and directing me to use the one off the laundry room. I used the laundry bathroom. I said nothing. My daughter-in-law is not a stupid woman. That is important to understand. She was methodical. She was building a case the way you build a case slowly, consistently, with documentation. She wanted me to fight back so she could frame me as the problem. She wanted me reactive, loud, emotional. That is what the whole strategy required. I refused to give it to her. There was one evening when I nearly broke. I had come downstairs for a glass of water around 10 o'clock and found them both in the living room, looking at what I recognized as my filing cabinet documents spread across the coffee table. My filing cabinet, the one in the office, that had always been locked. I stood in the doorway for a moment. My heart was going very fast. "What are you doing?" I asked. Daniel had the grace to look ashamed. Renee did not. "We're just trying to understand the full picture," she said, "for estate planning purposes." "Those are my files," I said. "We're family, Margaret." I looked at Daniel. He looked at the table. He didn't say a word. I walked to the coffee table. I gathered every paper. I took them to my room. I locked my bedroom door, which I had never done before in that house, not in 27 years. I sat on my bed in the dark, and I thought about Roy. I thought about the morning I found out he was gone. I thought about how he would have handled this my Roy, who was a quiet man, steady as a post, who had once told me that you never need to raise your voice if you've already done the right thing. I thought, I have already done the right thing. The house is protected. Now I need to protect myself. I called Patricia the next morning, and I told her what I was thinking. She said, "Tell me where and when, and I'll have the spare room made up." Patricia lives in a century home in Stratford, about an hour and a half from Oakville. She has been widowed herself. Her husband passed 7 years ago, and she has a garden and 2 cats and an absolute refusal to feel sorry for herself that I have always admired. I also called my younger sister Carol in Burlington, and my friend Deborah, who I had worked with for 20 years at the therapy clinic. I told them what was happening. Not everything, but enough. Then I called Gerald. I want to be precise about what I did next, because I think precision matters. I did not leave in the middle of the night. I did not sneak away. I did not cry or make a scene or say a single harsh word to my son. On a Thursday morning in November, while Daniel was at work and Renee was at her spin class, I packed 2 large suitcases, my overnight bag, and a box of things I particularly loved: Roy's photograph from our trip to Newfoundland, my mother's tea set, some books. I loaded them into my car. I left a note on the kitchen table. It said, "I've gone to stay with Patricia for a while. I hope you'll use the time well, Mom." And then I drove away from my house in Oakville, the house I had lived in for 27 years, the house where Roy and I had raised our son and grown old together and planned our retirement. And I did not look in the rearview mirror. I want to tell you honestly, the first 3 days were the hardest of my life since Roy died. Not because I missed the house exactly, but because there is something specifically devastating about being made to feel unwanted in your own home. I had known, intellectually, what was happening, but driving away from it made it real, in a way that knowing hadn't. I cried in Patricia's driveway for about 10 minutes, while her cat watched me from the front window with complete indifference, which was actually helpful. Patricia made tea. She did not offer advice I hadn't asked for. She put me in her spare room with a thick duvet and a lamp and said, "You sleep as late as you want." I slept 11 hours. Daniel called that evening. I didn't answer. He called again the next morning. I sent a text that said, "I'm safe and well. I need some space. I'll be in touch." He called 4 more times over the next 2 days. On the 5th day, he left a voicemail. His voice was different, not demanding now, something closer to worried. He said, "Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Can you please just call me?" I listened to that voicemail 3 times, and I felt something complicated. Because he is my son, and I love him, and love does not disappear cleanly just because someone has let you down. Love is not that well organized, but I also knew that whatever I was hearing in his voice was not yet understanding. It was not yet the thing I needed from him. It was still just discomfort. I needed him to sit in the discomfort a little longer. I had asked Gerald to send a letter. It was formal, clear, and outlined 3 things. that the house was and had always been held in a trust of which I was sole trustee, that no changes to title or ownership were legally possible without my consent, and that I was requesting 30 days without visitors or contact so that I could make decisions about the property's future occupancy. The letter arrived on a Monday. Daniel called me 4 times that day. I answered on the 4th call. He was not calm. He said, "Why didn't you tell me about the trust? Why didn't you ever tell me?" I said, "Because it wasn't relevant until it was. Renee is." He stopped. "This isn't what we wanted, Mom." "What did you want, Daniel?" I asked. I kept my voice very even. What I saw was my files on the living room table, and a folder with my name on it that I didn't put there, and a request for my home that I didn't invite. Silence. "I want to understand how those things were supposed to help me," I said. More silence. She thought he started. "I'm not asking what she thought," I said gently. "I'm asking what you thought." That question hung in the air between us for a long time. He didn't answer it that day, but the fact that he couldn't answer it told me more than any answer would have. I stayed at Patricia's for 3 weeks. Then I spent 10 days with my sister Carol in Burlington. Then I drove to Deborah's cottage near Owen Sound and stayed for a long weekend. I walked on the shore of Georgian Bay every morning in the cold November air, and I thought about what kind of life I wanted to build with the years I had left. During those weeks, something unexpected happened. I felt better. Not just better than I had in those months with Daniel and Renee, better than I had in years, better than the gray numbness that had settled over everything since Roy died. I was making decisions. I was talking to people who loved me. I was sleeping well and eating when I was hungry, and reading books in the afternoon without apologizing to anyone for the quiet. I was living in my own life again. At the end of November, I went home. I gave Daniel and Renee 2 weeks' notice, in the form of a letter also from Gerald's office, explaining that I would be returning to the property on a specific date, and that I expected the house to be in the same condition in which I had left it. The letter also outlined clearly that the arrangement of their staying in the house had always been informal and temporary, and that I was now formally ending that arrangement, effective 30 days from the date of the letter. Gerald had suggested this language. I had approved every word. Daniel called when he received it. This conversation was different from all the others. He was quiet at the start. Then he said, "Mom, I owe you an apology." I waited. I didn't protect you. I should have. You were in your own house, and I let things happen that I never should have allowed. I don't know how to explain that except that I think I stopped seeing you clearly for a while. And I'm sorry. I sat with that for a moment. There are apologies that cost a person something real to give, and you can hear the weight of it in their voice. This was one of those. "Thank you," I said. Is there a way forward?" he asked. "There is always a way forward," I said. "But it starts with you understanding that this house is not an asset to be managed. It's where I live. It's where your father and I built our life. It is mine, and it will be for as long as I want it." "I know," he said. "I need you to know that without any asterisks," I said. He said, "I do." I came home on a cold Tuesday in December. I walked through my front door, set my bags down in the hall, and stood there for a moment. The house was quiet. They had already moved out a week before, according to the letter's terms. Renee had left without saying goodbye, which told me everything I needed to know about whether the apology would have been possible from her end. Everything was intact. My filing cabinet was locked. My cast-iron pan was back on its hook. I don't know if Daniel had put it back before leaving, or if it had been there all along, but it was there. I ran my hand along its handle. I made tea. I took it out to the porch. It was about 4 degrees, which is nothing for an Ontario December. I wrapped my hands around the mug, and I looked at my garden, bare and dormant, and I thought, in the spring the dahlias will come back. They always do. I have thought carefully about what I want to say to any of you watching this who recognize something in this story, because I know some of you do. I have seen it in the comments on stories like this one. All the women who write this is my life, or I thought I was the only one. You are not the only one. Here is what I wish I had told myself much earlier. Your age is not a vulnerability. Your kindness is not a weakness. And your willingness to give is not an invitation to take. I let Daniel and Renee move in because I loved my son and I was lonely after Roy died. That was not foolish. That was human. What I should have done sooner, what I want you to do if you are in a version of this, is speak to a lawyer before anything is signed or suggested or proposed. Not because your children are necessarily acting in bad faith, but because having that protection means you can make decisions from a position of safety rather than fear. Roy gave me that protection, and it changed everything. The other thing I want to say is this. Disappearing was not an act of defeat. I want to be very clear about that. I did not leave because I was pushed out. I left because I chose to. There is an enormous difference, and it took me a long time to feel it clearly. When I drove away that Thursday morning, I was not running. I was stepping out of a dynamic that had never been about my well-being and into one that was. Daniel and I speak every week now. He is living in a rental in Hamilton with Renee, and there is a distance between us that is still being carefully, slowly reduced. He came for Christmas. He brought flowers. He helped me put the outside lights up on the porch the way Roy used to do, the ones along the railing that I can see from the street when I come home at night. We had dinner. We talked. We didn't say everything that probably needs to be said not yet. But there is time, and the foundation under us is more honest than it was. That is worth something. The house is still mine. It will be for a long time yet.